So the Government News Alliance has set its sights on Joe Rogan again, and is trying to cancel or discredit him for agreeing with them. Today, we'll be looking at 5 articles and running them through a 5-sheet that shows us how the powers that be are wagging their finger at Joe Rogan for saying the same facts that are in the approved narrative, but not exactly in the approved narrative fashion. Now, the one point they seem to be most hung up on is the straw man feigning ignorance, where the articles are mischaracterizing his original comments. So, a little backstory. The articles we're reading today are about his second comments, which are being variously described as him backpedaling or clarifying his original comments, which were made earlier this week. So the 5 articles we're reading today are from CNN, Axios, Hollywood Reporter, Market Watch, and the New York Post. All 5 of these are about the second comments, and they are all mischaracterizing the original comments. The original comments here are being described as Rogan saying that young people should not get the vaccine. Now, what he said in the actual clip is that he was describing a hypothetical scenario where if a young, healthy person exercises, diets, blah, 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 if that one individual person asked him, should I get the vaccine? He would say no. Now, is that the same thing as giving public policy guidance type advice to young people as a whole? Actually, it's not. That's something of a minor distinction, because what's right for one individual is not exactly the same as what's right for society as a whole. So he did not say it's best for society if that one individual does not get the vaccine. He just said it's best for that individual if he does not get the vaccine. And none of the experts they cite disagree with that. All of these articles are about how it's better for society as a whole if those younger people get the vaccine to stamp out, the virus in general, get us to herd immunity, etc. So, it's a little bit of a, slight technical differentiation. So that's why they're able to muddy the waters here. Right? Now, they're not going to come out and say this, but what the actual point of the people driving this messaging is that it's irresponsible for Rogan to come out and just say what the actual facts are. It's more responsible to lie/obfuscate the facts in order to push all the young people towards getting the vaccine. Whether or not it's good for that one individual young person is something that it's irresponsible to even discuss that topic. Because if you discuss that affects how many people are going to get it overall, that affects the bigger picture, etc. So, the people writing these articles think it's irresponsible to address that factual thing directly, and they can't even say that part out loud, right? They can't say, we're here, we're the journalists, we're the truth people, we're the democracy dies in darkness type of people, so we're just gonna lie, or we're gonna hide this detail, we're gonna keep that thing in the weeds and just keep pushing you on this narrative which we think will result in a specific policy outcome. They're not going to be upfront with what they're doing there because, one, that would undermine their credibility, and therefore it would undermine their credibility, so it would just hurt their reputation, they would lose money, blah, blah, blah. And two, it would undermine the message. Because if people are like, wait, you're not being straight with me, why am I going to go and get the vaccine? If you're just obfuscating the information in order to trick me into doing this, in order to convince me to do this, in order to overcome vaccine hesitancy through any means necessary. Right? So, that is the point where they feel that Joe Rogan is wrong about this, is that he addressed that factual issue head on. Where if you are an individual young person, it might not make sense for you to get the vaccine. While at the same time, it makes sense for society as a whole for that one individual young person to get the vaccine. And that's exactly what Fauci said in his rebuttal when they had Fauci come and, attack Rogan for making these comments. So, that's the central thrust of all 5 of these articles is that, we agree with Rogan on all the points, but the way he said it was not going to motivate enough people to get vaccinated through obfuscation. But we can't say that's what we're arguing because that would be clear that we're the ones obfuscating. So we're going to obfuscate while delivering this message. That's the central thrust of what's going on here. Now, one of the ways they do that is through poisoning the well. Most of these articles start out either the headline or right in the first paragraph is some variation of Rogan saying, I'm a moron. Now, for people who are not familiar with Rogan's podcast, that might seem like a big deal, or, that might seem like news. But for people who watch it regularly, he says this all the time. He says, I'm just a cage fighting commentator. I'm just out here, just speaking my opinion. I'm not a subject matter expert. Don't rely on me for medical advice, for technical advice, for financial advice. I'm just some friggin' guy out here with a podcast. And the fact that so him saying that is not news in any way. But the fact that all these articles put that as the lead of the story, especially people who are not familiar with that aspect of his podcast, it feels like Rogan has been backed into a corner. He got him on this vaccine thing. Now not only is he admitting that he's wrong about the vaccines, but he's admitting that he's just a daggone moron. And, putting something that feels damaging like that, even if you dig into it, it may or may not be damaging, but putting something that has that emotional weight right at the beginning of the story colors the way a reader's gonna view everything that comes after it. That's poisoning the well. That is a dishonest, manipulative tactic. So, one thing to keep in mind is, if news sources are using dishonest, manipulative tactics, they are not to be trusted. They are not being honest with you, by definition. Now, another thing that particular Poison the Well did is it's working towards this thing. A lot of these institutional corporate news sites have been doing, especially in this whole pandemic situation, is normalizing the appeal to authority fallacy, right? Where if some guy is a doctor, then he's right, period. We have to trust the experts, whatever the hell that means. Experts disagree about stuff all the time. If you've ever watched a trial, they'll have expert witnesses on both sides saying the exact opposite. So this has been a narrative that's been gaining momentum in the news with people like Fauci is, the paragon of expertise, where whatever Fauci says is just gold. You can't disagree with that guy. He is the expert. Or, other people who, and the weird thing about it is there are other people who are doctors, who are epidemiologists, but if what they say is counter to the prescribed narrative, then they are not described as an expert. They're considered like a conspiracy theorist. Or, they'll have some other epithet they describe them with. But you lose your expertise as soon as you cut against whatever the corporate media wants you to be saying. So it's the fact that some guy's wearing a white lab coat and has a stethoscope around his neck does not make his opinion more valid than someone else's. This is a classic, well-known argumentative fallacy, and this is becoming more and more accepted. So part of this poison the well here is they're working towards that. They're normalizing it more. Where Rogan says, I'm just a moron, I'm not a doctor, I'm just a cage fighting commentator. But at least my thing is I'm just trying to be honest. And they're treating that as an admission of him being wrong, or us not being correct and putting any credence in whatever he says. That if you're not a member of, whoever CNN deems to be an expert, then you're not someone that should be trusted in any way. Alright, the next thing most of these articles talked about, the next name manipulation tactic here, was an example of joke fraud. Now, this was not one that the articles themselves did, but it's one that they typed down approvingly by the White House, Communications Director Kate Bedingfield. So this was by type down approvingly. I mean, these news articles were just acting as stenographers. There was no pushback. There was no critical analysis. They just typed down what she said and boom, there it is. That, if it came from a source they disagreed with, they'd have some kind of fact checkers, or they'd have some context or whatever. They wouldn't just uncritically lay it out, right? They're acting as stenographers here. Now, what she did was actual joke fraud. Joke fraud, for those who don't know, you can see the definitions of all these name manipulation tactics on the website, linked below. But joke fraud is where you take someone's argument, you misrepresent it, and then you skewer that misrepresentation you just did. So you see this all the time on The Daily Show, on those late night type of shows. So what they did here, the example at hand, quote, "Did Joe Rogan become a medical doctor while we weren't looking? Hey-oh!" Obviously, it was described as a quip by at least one of these articles. So obviously that was supposed to be funny. And so let's break down how it was joke fraud. So it misrepresents the position because it implies that to discuss anything relating to COVID or the vaccines, or it's unclear exactly what the bounds are, but to discuss anything relating to something in that field, you have to be a medical doctor. Like, I don't think this White House communications director is a doctor, so she's kind of on shaky grounds here, just even broaching the subject. But either way, so it implies that you have to be a medical doctor to even comment on the position. So that's the misrepresentation of where Rogan was coming from. And then it skewers it by being like, huh, did he just get that degree overnight? Or that, certification, whatever you call it, that licensure? Hey-oh! So, classic case of joke fraud there. But another reason that this is really an issue is because it furthers that normalization of appeal to authority that we talked about earlier, where Rogan is not even able to discuss this issue unless he is on the approved expert list by the team of media and government, by, the White House / CNN / Facebook, by, all the powers that be. If he's not on their approved list of speakers, then he should not be speaking about the subject. That is a very disturbing trend, and it's one that these articles here are furthering along the way. Not one that I enjoy. So, all told, it seems unlikely that this effort to unseat the king of podcasting will be successful, but these guys are clearly testing their strength. And if they're able to even make a dent in Rogan's reputation, I think we can expect the next time they have something that'll serve their agenda for us to see them rinse, repeat, and re-lie. So keep your eyes out for that.